Hey kids, you're probably wondering why I'm wearing a puppy costume. Well, it's because I'm going to be in a play. So if you stick with me, you're going to learn about all the elements of drama. So you're going to need some scissors, a glue stick, some colored pencils, crayons, or highlighters, and a pencil to write with. So these are the pages you're going to need to complete this activity. If you don't have them, you can click the link in the description box below and go grab yourself a copy, or you can just follow along and see what you learn. So you're going to want to go ahead and cut out around these two rectangles, just the outside line, this one and this one over here. So you're going to cut those out, and then you're going to cut this one out around the dotted or dashed line over here, and then we'll be ready to start. Okay, so you're going to fold on this bold line under Elements of Drama. And then you're going to line it up on your paper and just put glue on that little flap that we made. Then you're going to smooth it out. Then get your other piece that says definitions and fold on that bold line backwards and then forwards. And then you're going to tuck it underneath the Elements of Drama page so that it fits. And then just put glue on that little flap, smooth it out. Then you're going to open it up and you're going to put the other piece inside. You're going to glue it right to the notebook paper. So just make sure it fits and you don't need to adjust anything. Then really cover the back of it with the glue and then flip it over and stick it in there and smooth it down, and then we'll be ready to go. Just pause the video so you can catch up. Okay, so now that you've got the foldable put together, now we're going to go ahead and start talking about the elements of drama. And this first flap that we have here is drama. We're not going to cut these apart yet. It's going to be a lot easier to maneuver if we don't cut them apart. So we're just going to leave them together right now. And so we're going to open this up and look at the definition. It says that drama is a piece of writing, which is called a script, that tells a story and is acted out on a stage. So when we open this up, the piece that we glued under here is actually the script for this play, The Grasshopper and the Ants. So this is the script that the actors would get. They would memorize their parts, and then they would get up on the stage and they would act it out, and eventually they wouldn't have to use the script anymore. They would just know it. They would know all the actions they were going to do and all the lines they were going to say. So this whole thing is called the script. So what we're going to do is we're just going to label it over here. And I'm just going to write script so that I can remember that a script is the whole written drama or play. And then I'm just going to put a bracket like this so I know it's the whole thing. Okay, so if you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that and get that written down. So the next one says acts. We're going to go ahead and put a purple border around this. So if you have colored pencils or crayons, you can use that. So that's going to be purple. And then I'm just going to highlight some key words in here. It says that acts are the main sections of a drama. They're like chapters of a book. Okay, so the way that books are separated into chapters, plays or dramas are separated into acts. And an act can be made of many scenes. And we're going to find out what a scene is in just a minute. So let's go ahead and open this up, and I can see right here that it says Act 1. So I'm going to highlight that just so that I remember this whole thing is Act 1. So it's like a chapter of this story. Okay, so go ahead and get that done. Now we're going to look at scenes. Scenes is our next word that we are going to look at the definition for. So I'm going to get orange out for this one. And I'm just going to go around it in orange, so I'll remember whenever I'm looking at this, everything that's orange is going to have to do with scenes. So scenes are part of an act where specific events happen. Okay? Scenes change each time the setting changes. So if the characters go to a new place, the scene is going to change. Because when you're watching a play on stage, it's not like watching a movie where the actors can actually go to that place. You have to change what you can see behind them. So all the people working behind the scenes, so to speak, are actually changing the backdrop or the background of the play and then putting up different things in the room or in the area where the actors are acting so that it looks like they're really in that place. So every time that background changes because they're in a different location, that is a scene change. So the setting is changing. So we're going to take a look right here and see what the scene is for this play. And it's scene 1. And if we look right here, it says outside on a summer's day. So that's the setting. So if we could imagine this play in our minds, we would be looking at a stage and it would be maybe green grass in the background, maybe some trees. It's going to look like it's outside on a summer day. So that's the setting for scene 1. So we're going to just write a little note here so that we can remember that the scene is going to have to do with the setting. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video if you need to. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about are stage directions. And we're going to do that in pink. And if you can imagine, the actors are on a stage, so the directions they're getting while they're on that stage are just specific instructions to the actors. So it's going to be telling the actors what they're going to do and maybe even how they're going to act. So let's look at some examples in here. Now, the stage directions are usually always going to be in parentheses. So these little lines right here that are setting it off from the rest of what is being said out loud helps the actors and the other people that are helping with the play know what needs to happen. So these are stage directions here. It's telling us outside on a summer's day, but I've got that highlighted orange for scene, so I'm just going to leave it, but I'm just going to underline this. A grasshopper sits under a tree playing his fiddle as ants run around gathering grain. So if your character was the grasshopper, you would know what you needed to be doing, and if you were one of the ants, you would know what you needed to be doing. So it's giving you, it's kind of setting up the scene whenever the audience starts watching the play of what the characters are doing. Now I'm looking for some more words in parentheses. Here's some. So the grasshopper is happily saying this, and he's also tucking his fiddle under his arm. So up here it said that he was playing his fiddle, and now he's stopped playing and he's putting it under his arm. So now the grasshopper character knows that he's going to do that whenever it's his turn to talk. Now, Ant 1 is annoyed. So when he says this, he's going to say it in an annoyed way. And there's no stage directions here. Here's another one. Shaking a piece of grain at the grasshopper. So they're collecting grain. What the grasshopper has said has annoyed them, so he's like shaking that grain at him because it's bothering him. And then the grasshopper is shaking his head. So all of those are stage directions that tell the actors how to act. So like here they're acting happy and here he's acting annoyed, or it even tells them the specific movements they're doing, tucking something under his arm or shaking something at him or shaking his head. So it just gives the actors specific instructions so that they know what the author wanted them to do when they wrote this play. Okay, so go ahead and pause this if you need to take a second and highlight those. Okay, so the next thing we're actually going to talk about is we're going to talk about the characters. Now, you've probably noticed that you see titles or names over here that are in bold, and then you see these little colons, which are these two dots on top of each other. Those are the characters, and it's in bold so that the character, the person playing the grasshopper, knows this is Grasshopper's time to speak. So I'm going to highlight Grasshopper's name. Now, he wouldn't say his name out loud on the script. That lets him know it's his turn to talk. He's going to say everything after it that isn't stage directions. So if it's in parentheses and it's slanted slightly, those are stage directions. That tells him how to act, and then the rest of it is the words that he says. So that's Grasshopper is one character. We've got ant number 1, ant number 2, ant number 3, and then Grasshopper speaks again. And you probably noticed this character up here called the narrator. Now I'm going to draw a box around the narrator. So the narrator is a character that doesn't really talk to or interact with the other characters that are acting out the scene. They kind of usually just stand off to the side and talk to the audience and give them additional information. So they might give more information about like the setting, about what's happening, and maybe even about the characters and how the characters are feeling. Because when you're watching a play or when you're reading a script, you aren't reading a book. So it's not like a story where the author is giving you all this inside information about what they're thinking and feeling and describing how they went and did it. You're looking at people acting something out, and they're only saying the things that they say out loud. You don't get to hear all the things they're thinking in their head. Or if it goes from one scene that's outside on a summer day and then the next scene it's a winter day, you might think like, what's going on? Is it winter all of a sudden? So the narrator has to fill in that information for you. So we're going to write a little note out here. And if you can't fit it right in here, then you can draw a line to narrator and you can write it over here, but I'm going to try and write it here. And I'm just going to write that the narrator gives more info, that's just short for information, more info about characters and setting. So they're telling you more about what the characters are thinking and where the characters are, and maybe from one scene to the next, how the scene has changed. So go ahead and pause the video, and if you don't think you can write that small, then I would just draw a line over here and write that information over here. It gives that the narrator gives more info about characters and settings, so that you'll remember whenever you look back at this what a narrator does. Okay, so the last one on the flat is dialogue, which if you've never seen this word written down, it is interesting the way it's spelled, but it's dialogue, and it's got a very simple definition. It's just the lines of the script that the actors speak out loud. So it's all the things the actors are actually supposed to say out loud. Okay, so we're gonna flip it and we're gonna actually see what they're saying out loud. The dialogue is what comes after the character's name. So here we've got the narrator, and then I see a whole bunch of dialogue that the narrator is saying, and I'm gonna draw a yellow box around this rather than highlighting the whole thing. So I'm just gonna do it like this, and then we'll read it and see what's happening. Grasshopper has spent the summer having fun and playing his fiddle. When he sees a family of ants, he thinks he'll have some friends to play with. Okay, so that's the first thing that the audience is hearing here in scene 1 about Grasshopper and ants. So let's look and find some more lines of dialogue. Grasshopper. Now he's not going to say his name, and he's not going to say the stage directions. That's what he's doing while he says it. So he's happily talking, and he's tucking his fiddle under his arm. So then he says, "What's all the fuss? Why don't you come dance and play with me?" Okay. Then ant number 1 is annoyed. "We have to store up food for the winter." That's what he says. So these are the lines they're saying. And then ant 2 says, "We don't have time to play. There's too much work to be done." And then ant number 3, while he's saying it, he is shaking a piece of grain at the grasshopper. "You would be gathering food too if you were wise." Then the grasshopper shakes his head. So he's just kind of shaking his head like these ants are crazy. "There's plenty of time for work before it gets cold. Right now we can play and enjoy the beautiful weather." So this is the conversation that's going on between the grasshopper and these 3 ants. And the narrator just kind of helped us understand what's been happening. Grasshopper's been playing all summer. The ants have been working, but he thinks he's got some friends to play with now, but he finds out that he does not have anyone to play with because they are all about business. So that's the dialogue that the audience is going to be hearing, and that's what they're seeing happen on stage, is everything put together makes the play come to life. All right, so we've only got a couple more things to highlight or to label. So one thing I want you to notice is that there are some specific things that it mentions that the actors would need to be using. And one of those is Grasshopper's fiddle. So in red here, I'm gonna circle fiddle because he has to have some kind of a violin or a fiddle to be using. And then there's a grain, so some kind of piece of grain. Now, imagine that a person is dressed up pretending to be an ant. They're going to have a piece of grain that's like really big because they're an ant, and a piece of grain to an ant would be really large. And they're collecting these grains and they're shaking it at the grasshopper when they're talking, and they're kind of irritated that he's bothering them. So we're going to draw a line over here, and we're going to write props. That's what these things are. Props are just things that the actors are going to be using on stage. So to make it more realistic, they're going to have these items that it's talking about, or something that looks like that item. Now, if you were just doing it in your classroom, you might not have a fiddle, but you could maybe cut out some cardboard to look like a violin or something, and maybe some crumpled brown paper up could look like some grain. So props are just the things that makes it look more realistic. Okay, and then there's one more thing we're going to talk about. So we highlighted the characters over here in blue, but we also want to talk about the things that they do and say, and how it helps us understand more about their personality. So we've learned a lot about Grasshopper and Ant in just this short little script. So what's Grasshopper been doing? He has been having fun, and he's been playing his fiddle. So we learn that he's just kind of happy-go-lucky. He's not worried about anything else. He thinks he's going to have someone to play with when he finds the ants. Well, he wants to dance and play, And let's see. He says we can play again down here and enjoy the beautiful weather. So all of these things that he's saying and doing, like playing the fiddle, just kind of give us this picture of he's just happy and he doesn't think about tomorrow and he's not worried about what he's going to eat in the winter. So he's not really being very smart because he's only thinking about the moment right now. So just the things that he's saying and doing give us a sense of his personality. Now the ants, on the other hand, what do they say a lot? They're storing up food here. So storing up food for the winter, which is work that they're doing, right? They say, we don't have time to play. There's too much work to be done. Here's another one. It says, you would be gathering food too if you were wise. Wise just means smart. So we can kind of get a better sense of the ants. Like they really have a thought for tomorrow and what's going to happen whenever it's cold and there's not any food to eat. So they're really thoughtful and they're really busy and they want to make sure they get everything done when they have time to do it. So they're really focused on work, whereas we can see the grasshopper's really focused on just playing and having fun and being silly. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about who wrote this play. And it says right here underneath the title that this story was adapted from Aesop's Fable by Carrie Carter. So I wrote this out as a play, which means that I am the author, but you don't call a person an author when they write a play. You actually call them a playwright, okay? So we're just gonna wrote the play. But I didn't come up with this story. This is a very, very old story that was actually written to teach a lesson by a guy named Aesop. And he wrote a lot of stories called fables. And so I adapted it from his story, which just means that I took that story and what it was about and I put it in my own words and I actually wrote it out like a script so that it could be acted out with all the stage directions and everything. Okay, so now you've learned a lot about drama and what the elements of a drama are, and you can see it all right here. We're going to go ahead and close this up. And so anytime you forget what one of these things are, you can come back and look at this and remind yourself what all the parts of a drama are. Thanks so much for joining me for this video. I hope you learned a lot about the elements of drama. Be sure to click the link in the description box below and you can go check out all my activities on drama and also check out some of my other videos, and be sure to subscribe so that you'll be notified when I post new educational videos. Bye.